The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes viewers lean closer to their screens without even realizing it. What happens when a podcaster, one of the most influential voices in America, calls out a television host for a statement so divisive it shakes the nation? This wasn't some typical celebrity spat or a staged Twitter feud. One comment, one passing remark on a live broadcast would ignite a firestorm that would divide the country and set social media ablaze. This was quickly shaping up to become one of the most controversial moments of 2026. On one side, Joe Rogan, the most listened-to podcaster in the United States, with millions of followers hanging on every word, had a reputation for being brutally honest, unfiltered, and unapologetically factual. On the other, Whoopi Goldberg, the iconic co-host of The View, known for her outspoken nature and fearless commentary, a woman whose career spanned decades and earned her an EGOT, someone whose voice had shaped conversations about culture, race, and politics. But this time, Whoopi said something that stunned everyone watching, a comment that generalized an entire race in a way few expected from someone of her stature. And when Rogan responded, the fallout was immediate, explosive, and unavoidable. It all began in the familiar setting of The View's studio, a place where hot topics are debated with energy, laughter, and occasional outrage. Whoopi Goldberg had always been known for controversial statements, moments that sometimes made viewers cringe, sometimes nod in agreement, but there was a line, and she crossed it. Joe Rogan, on the other hand, rarely responds to mainstream media drama. He lets most things pass, letting clips go viral without a word. But when he speaks, millions listen, and his words carry weight. What started as a standard discussion about diversity initiatives and systemic issues in America quickly morphed into something none of the hosts could have predicted. Whoopi's words sent shockwaves through the audience, the live viewers, and soon after the entire country. Joe Rogan, after seeing the clip, dissected it in a way that exposed uncomfortable truths, forced accountability, and sparked national debate. Before we dive into that explosive confrontation, it's crucial to understand the players involved. Both have a history of stirring controversy, but this incident was different. The combination of Whoopi's bold statement and Rogan's calculated response created a moment that transcended television and podcasting, a cultural touchstone that challenged assumptions, called out hypocrisy, and questioned the boundaries of free speech in modern media. Whoopi Goldberg has been a fixture on The View for decades, a cultural icon whose career spans film, theater, television, and activism. She is one of the few entertainers to earn an EGOT, Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony, cementing her as a rare talent whose voice commands attention. But fame brings scrutiny, and Whoopi has never shied away from controversial statements. Over the years, her fearlessness in speaking her mind has made her both celebrated and criticized. From political debates to cultural commentary, she has repeatedly pushed boundaries, often walking a fine line between thought-provoking insight and statements that sparked backlash. Her ability to blend humor, passion, and conviction has made her a powerful presence. But there has also been a pattern of commentary that critics argue is divisive, particularly around racial issues. She has questioned societal norms, challenged political correctness, and at times made sweeping generalizations that have left audiences and co-hosts alike unsettled. Joe Rogan, by contrast, built his influence in a different arena entirely. The Joe Rogan Experience, his podcast, has grown into the largest long-form interview show in the world, reaching over 15 million listeners per episode. Rogan is known for his deep dives into topics ranging from science and philosophy to politics and pop culture, always emphasizing curiosity, skepticism, and fact-based discussion. He rarely engages in mainstream media feuds. His style is not reactive, but analytical. When he does address controversial issues from television or celebrity culture, the world listens. His reputation as a fact-checker, someone willing to break down statements with evidence and logic, gives him authority, and his calm, methodical approach contrasts sharply with the performative outrage often seen on cable news and daytime television. The View itself is designed to thrive on controversy. Its Hot Topics segment is structured to provoke debate, challenge perspectives, and generate headlines. The show has a history of discussing sensitive racial and political issues, often drawing polarized reactions from viewers. Whoopi Goldberg, as both co-host and sometimes moderator, has the freedom to speak openly, shaping conversations with her distinctive voice. Her presence guarantees attention, but it also carries the risk of stepping into territory that provokes backlash. Past episodes have seen heated discussions on race, politics, and culture, sometimes ending in applause, sometimes in tension, but nothing quite like what would unfold this time. It all started on a regular Tuesday episode, a day that seemed ordinary in every way. The topic, race relations in America, a recurring subject on the show. The panel was engaged, the audience attentive, and the conversation flowed naturally at first, exploring initiatives aimed at improving diversity, examining systemic inequities, and discussing current events that highlighted societal divisions. Whoopi Goldberg listened carefully, nodding along, occasionally interjecting with her trademark wit and blunt observations. But beneath the surface, something was brewing. Whoopi's energy shifted subtly at first, her tone sharper, her body language more assertive. The discussion, initially calm, began to take on an edge as she prepared to make a statement that would shock not just the studio audience, but viewers across the nation. The panel could sense it. The audience leaned forward. Everyone knew, even if they didn't yet understand, that this was a moment where normal debate would give way to confrontation, a moment that would be replayed on social media endlessly. By understanding the backgrounds of these two influential figures and the environment in which the discussion unfolded, we can appreciate why this incident was different. It wasn't just a controversial comment, it was a collision of worlds. Whoopi's history of bold, sometimes polarizing statements met the analytical, dissecting lens of Joe Rogan's podcasting platform. And the result would be a cultural explosion, the kind of media moment that doesn't just make headlines, it forces the country to stop and pay attention. The cameras rolled as The View opened the segment on diversity initiatives, the studio buzzing with energy. The panel, a mix of seasoned hosts and guest commentators, began discussing systemic racism, corporate efforts toward inclusion, and the ongoing challenges in American society. Initially, the conversation was measured, respectful, and even-handed. Hosts shared their personal experiences, provided examples from recent news, and debated the effectiveness of various programs. Viewers at home felt they were witnessing another typical discussion, albeit one of considerable social relevance. The audience, both in studio and online, was engaged but calm, nodding along, murmuring agreement, and occasionally reacting with thoughtful applause. Whoopi Goldberg, sitting in her familiar chair, seemed to be listening intently. She leaned forward, occasionally adjusting her glasses, her signature calm demeanor suggesting she was weighing her words carefully. Yet there was a subtle tension building in her posture, a hint of anticipation that even casual viewers might have noticed. The discussion was evolving, and her mind, shaped by decades of navigating the intersection of culture, politics, and race, was preparing to interject, not as a mediator, but as a voice ready to dominate the conversation. The other hosts, experienced in handling her bold statements, remained attentive, unsure where this discussion might head. When she finally spoke, the energy in the studio shifted instantly. Her voice, normally measured and dryly humorous, grew sharper, more assertive, carrying the weight of authority. Her hand gestures became more pronounced, her eyes locked onto the camera and the co-hosts as she made her point. The audience instinctively leaned forward, sensing that the conversation was no longer standard discourse. Other hosts exchanged subtle glances, recognizing that Whoopi was stepping into territory that could ignite controversy. The stage was set for the moment that would define this episode, and later, dominate national headlines. Then came the statement that would shock viewers. Whoopi began talking about white people, not in the context of individuals or systemic structures, but as a sweeping generalization. She framed her words in a way that assigned blame, attributing broad societal issues to the entire race. It was no longer a nuanced discussion on inequality or policy. It was a statement that painted a whole group of people with the same brush. The other hosts' expressions shifted from curiosity to discomfort. Some opened their mouths, perhaps to interject, but the words died in the air. The audience in the studio fell silent, sensing the gravity of what had just been said. Even seasoned television viewers could feel the line being crossed in real time. Her exact phrasing, precise and deliberate, left no room for misinterpretation. She generalized, accused, and framed the discussion in absolutes, turning what should have been a constructive conversation into a moment of division. Attempts by co-hosts to provide nuance or offer counterpoints were quickly shut down. Whoopi's intensity, now fully unleashed, dominated the space. The audience was split, some in silent shock, others nodding in agreement, and the cameras captured it all. The energy was electric, tense, and unpredictable. As the segment neared its conclusion, the studio felt the impact of her words. The live audience's reactions were mixed, a reflection of the nation's own divided sentiments. Some applauded cautiously, others remained frozen, unsure how to respond. The show cut to commercial amidst a flurry of whispered discussions, producers scrambling behind the scenes to assess the fallout. The clip, already capturing the attention of those present, would soon reach a much wider audience online. In that brief window, the seeds of national controversy were planted. What had started as a normal Tuesday episode had transformed into a cultural flashpoint. Whoopi Goldberg's generalizations weren't just controversial, they were incendiary, a catalyst for debates about race, bias, and accountability. And while the television segment ended with a commercial break, the story was only beginning. Across the country, viewers, journalists, and social media users were watching closely, waiting to see how this unprecedented comment would be received. Little did anyone know that one of the most influential voices in podcasting, Joe Rogan, would soon intervene, and when he did, the reaction would redefine the conversation entirely. Within minutes of the episode airing, the clip of Whoopi Goldberg's comment was circulating online. Social media erupted as viewers replayed her words, shared screenshots, and debated the implications. Twitter exploded, with the hashtag Whoopi Goldberg trending within the hour. Conservative accounts amplified the clip, framing it as an example of reverse bias and double standards. While liberal defenders scrambled to contextualize her remarks, memes began to circulate. Reactions ranged from outrage to humor, and opinion columns appeared online faster than most networks could respond. It was, in every sense, a viral moment, a few seconds of television that captured the nation's attention and demanded a response. Somewhere in Austin, Joe Rogan received the clip from a producer who knew he would take notice. He watched it multiple times, pausing and replaying, analyzing the nuances of her statement. What caught his attention wasn't just the controversial nature of the comment. It was the sweeping generalizations, the absolutes, and the lack of accountability in her phrasing. Rogan discussed the clip with Jamie, his longtime producer, who helped curate sources, statistics, and historical context. After consideration, Rogan decided this was a moment that could not be ignored. His next podcast episode was already scheduled, perfectly timed for maximum reach. When Rogan speaks on something like this, the world listens. The next episode of the Joe Rogan Experience opened differently than usual. Rogan abandoned his typical casual banter, walking directly into the topic with a serious tone. We need to talk about something that's been circulating online, something that's important and honestly a little disturbing. He played Whoopi's clip in its entirety, letting her words speak for themselves before adding commentary. The audience, both live in the studio and listening remotely, reacted audibly, a mix of gasps, laughter, and murmurs filling the room. Rogan's expression was calm but serious, a clear indication that this was not a lighthearted segment. Then he began the breakdown. "Let's go through this word by word," he said, leaning forward, his tone measured yet firm. Rogan dissected every claim Whoopi had made, pointing out sweeping generalizations, highlighting the inherent racism in blanket statements about any racial group, and providing historical and statistical context to show why her conclusions were inaccurate. He remained calm throughout, using logic and evidence rather than hyperbole, making it impossible for viewers to dismiss his analysis as partisan outrage. Rogan's approach was methodical, almost surgical, cutting through the performance of controversy to expose the fallacy beneath the words. One of the most powerful moments came when Rogan raised the question of double standards. "Imagine if I said this about black people," he said, voice steady. "I'd be canceled immediately. My career would be over. And yet, when someone in the mainstream says something like this about white people, it's shrugged off. Why? That's the double standard, and it's unfair, it's inconsistent, and it needs to be called out." The studio audience reacted audibly, and listeners at home nodded along. Rogan's point hit a nerve. Accountability for racial commentary is uneven, and mainstream media often applies rules inconsistently, a truth that many viewers had suspected, but hadn't seen articulated so clearly. Fact-checking followed immediately. Rogan pulled up statistics, historical studies, and contemporary examples to dismantle what these claims. Each sweeping statement she had made was countered with nuance, data, and context. With Jamie assisting, Rogan displayed charts and figures on the studio monitors, walking through the evidence methodically. The effect was undeniable. What began as a fiery comment on television was being carefully deconstructed by logic, evidence, and calm reasoning. By the end of the segment, the audience understood not just that her words were problematic, but exactly why they were misleading and divisive. Rogan didn't yell, he didn't insult, he didn't theatrically perform outrage. Instead, he wielded facts as a scalpel, dissecting the argument while maintaining credibility and authority. His critique was precise. Whoopi's generalizations were not just incorrect, they were harmful, undermining constructive conversation on race while perpetuating stereotypes. Listeners across the country could see the logic unfolding in real time, and the reaction was immediate. Clips of Rogan's breakdown began circulating even before the episode ended, his analysis spreading faster than the original remark, amplifying the controversy to an entirely new level. By the time the show concluded, the cultural impact was already clear. The conversation had shifted from a divisive comment on daytime television to a national dialogue on accountability, media responsibility, and the boundaries of free speech. What Whoopi Goldberg said on The View was no longer just a segment. It had become a catalyst for broader discussion, with Joe Rogan at the center of the response, demonstrating the power of long-form analysis to challenge narratives and demand critical thinking. Within hours of Joe Rogan's podcast airing, clips of his breakdown were everywhere. Social media became a battlefield as millions shared, debated, and dissected his words. Rogan's response didn't just counter Whoopi Goldberg's comment, it overshadowed it entirely. Where Whoopi's clip had once been the viral center of attention, Rogan's methodical, calm, fact-driven dissection became the dominant narrative. Millions of views poured in within hours, surpassing the reach of the original broadcast, and forcing mainstream media outlets to acknowledge the conversation. Headlines blared across news websites. Joe Rogan versus Whoopi Goldberg, explosive racial debate goes viral. Podcast host calls out TV star in national controversy. And The View under fire after Goldberg comment, Rogan responds. The phrase Joe Rogan versus Whoopi Goldberg became a trending topic not just on Twitter, but across every social platform from TikTok to Instagram. The social media explosion was intense and divided. Conservative commentators praised Rogan for holding a media figure accountable, framing his analysis as a long-overdue critique of double standards in the mainstream. Liberals and Goldberg defenders argued she had been taken out of context, attempting to soften the blow and defend her legacy. Moderates and independent observers weighed in on the broader implications, calling out inconsistencies in how society treats racial commentary depending on who says it. Comment sections across platforms became chaotic debates, with memes, screenshots, and videos of both Rogan and Goldberg circulating endlessly. Celebrities chimed in, further amplifying the story, some supporting Rogan's critique, others defending Goldberg. The conversation had moved far beyond a daytime television segment. It had become a national cultural debate. Mainstream media quickly picked up the story. CNN ran segments analyzing the controversy, featuring interviews with commentators from multiple perspectives. Fox News highlighted Rogan's response, framing it as a challenge to the media's selective outrage. MSNBC attempted to defend Whoopi, emphasizing context and her history of advocacy, while conservative outlets broadcast Rogan's full segment in its entirety, praising his evidence-based approach. Across television, radio, and online platforms, the story dominated, with analysis, opinion pieces, and panel discussions dissecting every nuance. For days, this narrative was unavoidable, spanning the political spectrum and forcing media organizations to pick sides. Meanwhile, The View continued its regular programming the following day, but Whoopi Goldberg did not address the controversy directly. Producers likely instructed her to stay silent, letting the discussion die down naturally. The panel moved on to other topics, laughter and debates continuing as usual. But the silence on her part was deafening. In a way, her non-response spoke volumes, an acknowledgement that the backlash amplified by Rogan's intervention was impossible to ignore. Audiences noticed, commentators speculated, and social media chatter continued unabated. The damage was already done, with Rogan's methodical dismantling of her argument cementing itself in public consciousness. The aftermath of this incident highlighted the shifting landscape of media influence. A single podcast response could reach millions, overpowering traditional television and shaping public opinion. The incident underscored how accountability, or the lack thereof, in mainstream media is increasingly scrutinized in real time. Where once controversial statements might have passed with minimal consequence, the combination of social media virality and Rogan's platform made it clear. Public figures are now answerable to an audience that demands evidence, logic, and transparency. Joe Rogan's intervention didn't just critique Whoopi Goldberg, it demonstrated the power of new media to challenge old norms, hold established figures accountable, and redefine the conversation around race, free speech, and responsibility. The reverberations from Joe Rogan's response didn't stop at social media. They rippled through Hollywood, political commentary, and the broader media landscape. Comedians weighed in, many applauding Rogan's fact-based dismantling of Whoopi Goldberg's remarks, while others critiqued the tone and delivery. Political commentators dissected the implications for racial discourse, some framing it as a long-overdue confrontation against double standards, others warning about escalating polarization. Fellow podcasters and media personalities debated the broader lessons for accountability, arguing that mainstream figures could no longer assume immunity from critique. The View's own audience was split, with longtime viewers defending Goldberg, while others praised Rogan's clarity, calling it a wake-up call for the entertainment industry. This moment mattered because it highlighted systemic double standards in public discourse. Rogan's analysis forced a nation to confront uncomfortable questions. Why are sweeping generalizations about some racial groups tolerated, while others trigger immediate outrage? What is acceptable free speech, and where does it cross into hate speech? The incident exposed the uneven application of accountability in mainstream media, revealing that celebrity status often shields individuals from consequences. In contrast, Rogan's long-form, evidence-based platform allowed for a nuanced examination, empowering listeners to engage critically rather than passively consume outrage-driven soundbites. His approach demonstrated that facts, context, and careful reasoning could cut through the noise and force real reflection. On a larger scale, this confrontation symbolized the growing power of new media to challenge old media hierarchies. Television networks, once considered the ultimate arbiters of public opinion, now face scrutiny from digital platforms where audiences can instantly fact-check, share, and debate statements. Rogan's intervention exemplified how podcasting and social media can hold influential figures accountable in ways traditional outlets often cannot or will not. Viewers are increasingly empowered to demand consistency, fairness, and transparency, redefining the rules of engagement in public discourse. Ultimately, the Rogan-Goldberg episode became more than a clash of personalities. It was a case study in cultural accountability, media influence, and the dynamics of race in contemporary dialogue. The incident demonstrated that audiences are no longer passive consumers. They are active participants in shaping conversation, challenging hypocrisy, and demanding evidence over narrative. Joe Rogan didn't just respond to Whoopi Goldberg, he set a new standard for how media figures are called to account, forcing society to examine the fine line between controversial commentary and harmful generalizations. What can we take away from this moment? Whoopi Goldberg's comment was by definition a sweeping generalization that crossed the line into racism. Joe Rogan's response, however, was measured, factual, and methodical, an example of how powerful, long-form analysis can confront misinformation and bias without devolving into theatrics. The incident revealed the obvious double standards in public discourse, showing how media figures are often held accountable unevenly depending on context, race, and platform. Rogan's fact-based approach set a precedent. Evidence, logic, and calm reasoning can cut through the noise and challenge entrenched narratives. Looking forward, questions remain. Will The View address the controversy on air? Will Whoopi Goldberg acknowledge the backlash or apologize? Will mainstream media admit the inconsistencies in how different voices are treated? Rogan's intervention demonstrated the growing power of new media to hold traditional platforms accountable, showing that audiences are no longer passive consumers. They are participants demanding fairness, clarity, and truth. The moment serves as a reminder that long-form, honest discussion can triumph over soundbite-driven controversy, and that those willing to dissect claims rigorously can reshape the national conversation. This wasn't just a battle between a podcaster and a television host. It was a confrontation between facts and narratives, scrutiny and celebrity, old media and new. And in this clash, the audience chose clarity, accountability, and truth. Rogan didn't just destroy an argument, he exposed an entire system. As viewers, we are left to ask, was Whoopi's comment racist? Was Joe Rogan right to call it out? The answers may shape how media, culture, and accountability evolve in the years to come.